Yeah, it did it. I got to do it. You know, stop. That's little Brian. But I've discovered there's Brian and little Brian, but I've discovered that little Brian is taller than I am, so I guess I'm Tiny Bob. Yeah, it just kind of came out at first service, and they said I couldn't leave it. Okay. Today we're calling it Earth Lessons, or I'm calling it Earth Lessons, and it's going to be a little different than we usually do. Usually I give you all kinds of, we talk about how to deepen your spiritual life, and next week we're going to go back to that. We're going to be talking about practices for deepening the presence of God, sitting in the presence of God. Not this week. This week rather than give you a bunch of practices and all of that, what we're going to do is just get some perspective. Some perspective. Now, we're going to blame this one on Reg, who has wisely chosen not to come today. Reg, if you're around, you know, once a year we let him get up and speak, and he's our resident bagpiper, and I think he actually is off piping today. But in any case, every once in a while, Reg gets together with me, and we're just supposed to be having a nice, friendly evening, burning a fire or something like that. When I burn a fire, I'm talking something with 40 or 50-foot flames. I gather for a year, and then we burn it in the backyard. I have a much larger backyard than most people do. But in any case, we're normally just having a good time, but he always comes over, and Reg, we're just starting to, enjoy the fire and all this, and then he wants to ask me some deep esoteric question, like, what do you think's really going on down here? Why are we here? And I always lead off with the, I have no idea. I believe that the entirety of why we're here is too large for these human minds to get to wrap around. Okay? But I'll tell you what I think. And then we're off and running, and I go into my wild and weird perspectives on life. Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take the perspective of the soul. You see, most of the time, we take the perspective of this personality, this being out here, this outer self that I am. And this outer self is real used to humans and human limitation and what we're up against to build a human life that's good and all of this. And we say, inside you, you've got a soul. Well, instead of looking at the soul from human perspective, today I want to look at the human from soul perspective. Okay? You wouldn't be here if there wasn't a soul inside of you. You're here because a soul chose to incarnate in the earth. Why on earth would they do that? Why would you choose to come into this? And we who sit around and say, oh my God, this is such a hard life. Earth life is hard, and it's such a burden to do this and do that and do the other. And what we don't get is the soul's having the time of their life. The soul came in to do this. So, what's the soul get out of incarnating into the earth? Well, first, this is a grand field trip for your soul, okay? Y'all remember when you're back in school? I remember back in elementary school, we'd go on these field trips, We learned history. I was in Ohio, so we learned the history of the Indian mounds, Serpent Mound, and all those places, And then we'd get in the bus, and they'd take us out, and we'd walk all over them and walk around and look, oh, okay. And yeah, I can't see it's a serpent from here, but, I guess from up top you could. And it is a whole different experience to learn about something in a classroom, academically, abstractly, than it is to walk around Serpent Mound. And I don't know that you learn a lot of intellectual facts doing that, but it makes it very real, and you get a whole different experience from doing that. And so this is just a field trip for your soul. Comes in for a few years to live as a human being. Now, why would it do that? Well, there's all kinds of amazing experiences, things you can learn experientially. I mean, think about it. You like to jump in the pool and go swimming, or worst case scenario, go swimming in a lake. I say worst case scenario because actually one of the best swims I ever had was in a place called Lake Eufaula. We were traveling through Oklahoma, and they said, oh, you got to come down and see the lake because Oklahoma hasn't got a lot of water. But they've got this one big lake, actually several, but Lake Eufaula. And we went down and we looked at it and we thought, you want us to swim in that? I mean, this is one of those lakes that's got red clay, and I mean, it's thick through the water. You're looking in and you can't see any. You go, wow, the mud's so thick in that water, I don't think I can see it. I don't know whether I want to get in that. But we did get in it. And wow, this is the best feeling in the world. Well, why do you go swimming in the lake? It's a whole lot easier to walk around the lake than to swim across it. Am I not correct? And yet it's a whole different bunch of feelings. It's like, it's so experiential to move into an environment that's harder to get around in. And it's got its limits. You got to observe a whole different set of limits. I mean, water's harder to move through. And if you don't observe the limits, you drown, right? There are rules. And it's so invigorating to get into a different environment, even though it's harder in some ways. And this is what your soul is doing when it comes into the earth. I mean, here, think about your soul. It is in the higher realms. And the higher realms are relatively timeless. Everything on earth is timed. You're in this glow. You're in this presence of God consciously. And there isn't a lot of resistance. Earth is just filled with resistance. You don't, a celestial body is very different from a physical body. And so here it is, you want to be with someone and you're all traveling around, you think of them and you're there. In physical life, you literally have to plod to get somewhere. And when you do, you're still in your body and they're in theirs. In the higher realms, you just merge consciousness. Just totally experience the other person. You create your life in your mind. Here, we got to gather stuff, put it together. It takes effort. And yet, just like jumping in the lake to take a swim, coming into earth is vacation for the soul. It's a real adventure. In the end, it's like climbing a mountain. We call that fun. But the real fun is in mastering the challenge. And that's why a soul comes into the earth, to master the challenges. So what I want to do is talk about several of the challenges, a few of the challenges that soul faces when it comes to the earth. What did it come in here to master, to deal with? And the first one I've actually started into, it's called physical embodiment. Physical embodiment. Here we are, spiritual beings. To be someone, somewhere, we think, hold our attention, we're there. You come into this body and you literally have to put one foot in front of the other. You got to plod to get there. You have to build your life. You have to collect things, put them together, create something. It's amazingly laborious, but it's like swimming through that lake. It's different. It has different sensations when it depends on this type of labor to accomplish something. Our office manager, Linda, has a new poster on her wall. I mentioned it the other week. You know, it's the picture of this three-toed sloth. And below it, it says, "Sloth is my spirit animal." Yeah, I like that because that's this is sloth consciousness down here. It's heavy, it's thick, it takes effort. We move ever so slowly to accomplish our lives, and we're going to have to keep our attention on the goal or we're never going to get there. And there's so much to learn from that. 1 Corinthians 15:40. There are celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial, but the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another. It's glorious to be in a body that has no limits. It's another type of glory to work to accomplish what you accomplish. So, physical embodiment for the soul is like when we go on vacation and go scuba diving, right? The end, if you go scuba diving, you put on, you got this heavy tank on your back, you've got weights around your waist, you've got a complete outfit on, and it's amazingly laborious, and you jump in the water, and now, you also have a bunch of new rules. You have a bunch of limits and rules, and if you don't follow them, you die. And that's Earth. It jumps in, swimming, but why on earth would you go scuba diving? Well, you go scuba diving because you can see all manner of things. You can experience all manner of things you can't experience up there. And that's what's going on. And while you're just groaning through all these responsibilities and burdens and challenges, your soul is just saying, hey, I can't do this up top. This is stupendous. This is glorious. Your soul's having a really good time while we're working our tails off as human beings. And if we could tap into that just a little bit, it'd be really helpful to our lives. So, physical embodiment, moving into density. If there's anything that people who write on the subject agree on, it's that the soul can learn so much faster in the earth than it can in the higher planes. It can expand. Why? Because there's weight on the bar. You want to build muscles, you put weight on the bar. Well, there's any place got weight on the bar, it's down here. Okay? It takes effort to accomplish anything you're accomplishing. You're fighting against so many influences in order to make it happen. There's constant weight on the bar, and sometimes that weight on the bar hurts, but boy, it builds muscles. It builds spiritual muscles to go through this type of experience. You're moving into a risk-reward system that we have here on the earth. Remember I said you can die. A soul never dies, but like any good video game, you can lose your life and have to start over. Okay? That's how it works. If you screw up and that's it. Now you get to start over. Where was I? I have no idea. Oh, I'm saying you learn so much. You expand so much. There's not a lot of weight in the higher realm. There's not a lot of risk in the higher realms. And thus the impetus to learn and the drive to expand is so much stronger. Now, the deal is this with the weight. If you know that you're doing this, that this is why you're here, you lean into the wind. You can feel the wind coming at you, but it doesn't stop you. You lean into the wind and you move right on where you're going. And that is the challenge. So here we are. First, the pure density of life here makes it intense. And there's so much potential for soul to grow, to learn, to expand, to experience. And then there's that partnership with body, which is its own experience. Remember, body's celestial and body's terrestrial. And a terrestrial body, we've got to learn how to partner ourselves with something that is fragile, that is vulnerable. We got to feed it, we got to take care of it, we got to grow it, we got to basically take care of this body or we'll pay the price. And so we learn to partner with it and work with the body. And that's a whole experience unto itself, working with these type of restrictions. I mean, I just finished the movie. I re-looked at that movie, Apollo 13, right, where they had the problems and they had to do some things to survive until they could get down. And in this one instant, they're saying, okay, we have got to create a new carbon dioxide filter to filter out carbon dioxide, only we have to do it using only what's in that capsule right now. There wasn't a lot in them in those days. And so here they are, there's a bunch of things on a table and it says, we got to make this work. Now, they didn't say just, we have to create a carbon dioxide filter, which is a great, wonderful thing if you've got all the assets in the world. And in the higher realm, you got all the assets in the world. But down here, you got whatever you got. And you got to work with it. And the challenge is, can I do it with what is presented to me? That whole partnership, illness. Souls don't die and they don't get sick. Dealing with a body that has illness. So there's lots of lessons that comes from trying to baby a body through to get as many miles out of it as you can. Reminds me of when my wife years ago presented me with our, we had a teal Dodge Caravan, and she said, it can't go any further. I cannot drive this any further. I'm afraid it's going to break down on me at any moment. I need another car. And I said, fine, and I then drove it for another 6 years. That's because I knew how to baby it. I knew how to compensate for its weaknesses. And that's how we deal with body, how we learn to work with body. And that type of partnership has its own lessons in it. So, okay, just pure physical embodiment is an amazing workspace for your soul to learn from. It's amazingly wonderful lab, you might say, for soul growth. But number two, what the earth provides as a challenge is, I call it earth energies. And what we've got to learn to do is rise above the environmental influences around us in order to accomplish what we want. Remember that wind blowing in your face? You're trying to go here. Well, when the wind's blowing in your face and you realize that you don't let the wind just blow you away, you lean into it and put a little more effort and go where you're intending to go. That's called self-will. And self-will is what we have to develop to overcome any influence in our life. And believe me, our life in the earth is overflowing with influences that want to drag us this way and drag us that way and drag us the other way. If you actually got a clear look at all the ways that the outer world is trying to influence you, it's a wonder we get anything done, okay? So let's look at this one. Soul, which comes from a space where there isn't a lot of resistance, is suddenly in a space where there are so many things trying to drag it away from its purpose. And so maintaining inner dominion under the influence of contrary outer forces becomes the lesson. There are a lot of contrary outer forces in the higher realm, so we get to do them here. 1 John 4:4, he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world, and that is the lesson of the soul, of every soul that comes into this place. To understand that we still have dominion over our life. We're going to have to deal and field all kinds of outer influences. There are things that are working on us. We have to recognize them and recognize them that they cannot stop us from going where we're planning on going. We have to not lose our focus. Ever seen on when they're preparing kids for basketball or something, and they're shooting off one of these foghorns in their ears just as they're about to take a shot? Can you make it while there's this influence from the outside? That's kind of what earth life is like. So, what are these things that are causing influence or tendencies on us? There's the obvious stuff. We're trying to go here and a major obstacle comes up in our path. All the difficulties that come up in life. Then there's people's opinions and wishes. This is really thick. You can feel it. When someone wants you to do something that you don't want to do, you can feel them wanting you to do it. It is an energy that you've got to deal with. I want them to do this way. I want them to go that way. And we say, I'm feeling torn apart. Of course you are. You have influences pulling you in opposite directions. You still have to choose which way you're going. And there's a strength, a soul strength that comes from that type of choosing. There's body influences. And then there's the subtle ones, the ones we pay no attention to. And you probably have to become aware of them a little bit in order to make sure they're not pulling you in a certain direction that you don't want to go in. The earth is filled with subtle influences. And the question is, can you be who you are in the midst of them? Little things like positive and negative ions in the air. Most of us aren't running around with ion calculators. But there are places on earth where the positive ions, which cause depression, are so thick that people almost can't survive there, and suicide rate is huge. And all the new air filters have that ion button, so you can put more negative ions in the air to support feeling good, upliftment, optimism. But the bottom line is, I don't care how many ions are in the air, you still have to maintain your focus on where you're going and what you're going to do if you're going to succeed in life, in spite of whatever the influence is. However, Vernon Howard said something years ago in one of his books that I've kept a long time. He said that awareness is 80% of the journey to mastering a problem. If you're aware that the wind is blowing in your face, you lean into it and go forward. If you're not aware, you go, why is it so hard to get where I want to go? It's just the wind. So our thing is to become aware that there are all kinds of influences all around us and keep our focus no matter how we're being tugged this way or that. For instance, I said positive and negative ions. Well, there's also the thought atmosphere, right? We think my mind's mine, nobody pays any attention to it. I'm sorry, the opposite is true. Wow, that was an agreement. Okay, the opposite is true. The bottom line is all our minds are connected. We're constantly radiating our stuff out there, and everybody's picking them up. We may not be paying a lot of attention, but there is this subtle thing. Have you ever walked in a room where everybody's afraid? It's actually hard to keep the adrenaline down. But you can be the one who walks into the room and chooses not to participate. That you're going to go anyway where you intended to go. The land itself is an influence on people. We say, oh, that's just the dead stuff underneath my feet. It isn't dead for an instant. A land molds its people. What is drawn out of human beings who live on the sifting sand of Florida versus what is drawn out of human beings who live among the granite cliff faces of the Rocky Mountains, it draws entirely different things out of you. We pay no attention, but there is an influence. The land is influencing us and changing us, unless we choose otherwise. And history stays in a place. Sometimes you're just picking up what has gone down there for ages. This is why people sweep out their houses and when they get a new one and they say, oh, I'm going to get rid of all the bad vibes, right? I had a friend, Neil, who did a big construction project in Taipan. And Taipan has a place where thousands of soldiers in World War II went off a cliff. Okay. And it was one of the big, there were lots of big tragedies in World War II, but it was one of them. And he said, when I went to build there, he says, it's a small island, and you go there, and even before he knew the history, he said, there was this heaviness to the whole place. He said, I had to fly home as often as possible just to survive. I almost couldn't keep myself out of depression while I was there. I could feel what had happened there. I had someone else say there was another place in Tasmania where there was they had prisons for years and years. Now, not there, but he said, I went there, I could feel it. There was this weirdness in the air. You can feel it. There are all kinds of things hanging around. And then, of course, we can go for celestial effects. We've done earth effects. What about the celestial ones? You say, ooh, are you talking astrology? Yes, but let's start with full moon and the fact that scientifically they've determined something's going on. That's why police departments have to put on extra personnel for a full moon. They know sunspots affect our moods and the way we function as human beings. When I grew up, my mom got into astrology, and she would do charts and all kinds of things, And I got into it just enough to be dangerous, I guess. I don't know. I got into it enough to know that I understood what it meant to be a Gemini, and that gave me a little more insight into the fact that one of the things I had to do was make sure I finished something. Because I had a big tendency not to. And I was in my head a lot and whatever. I mean, the things that went down with Gemini were generally true about me. And so I tend to go, I don't know what's going on there, but something's going on because I worked with it enough to know that in general it's like that. Though I will bluntly tell you that when my mother wrote me in my 20s and said, Bobby, during this period of time, you need to not be taking any trips. It'll be dangerous for you to travel, according to the chart that I've just done. I wrote her back and says, never write me and tell me that again. I don't want that in my consciousness. And I did travel during that period of time, and everything worked out. But my mom had told me there was a problem, so I traveled with that self-will of I will be safe and it will be good. Did that make the difference? I have no idea. But anyone who gets very far into astrology will tell you there's always the disclaimer. You can overcome anything with self-will. These are just influences. They are not what has to happen. None of this stuff has to control your life. And the sole lesson is to not let it. To be able to hold your focus while the foghorn is going off. So, how about number 3? One of the other major challenges of for the soul is handling emotion. There is feeling in the higher realm. Emotion, that's a little thicker. That's more an earth thing. Emotion is the fireworks of life. It can be beautiful or it can burn you. So you don't want to get rid of it. It can be beautiful. But somehow, you as a soul, your job is to make sure you don't get burned. I mean, I remember when I was doing a fireworks display for my daughter Lindsay and her teenage friends. They were all over in the evening, and we've got a backyard that nobody's in, so, nobody's close. So we were doing it. I had the Roman candle out there, and I let the boys set the thing up. I should have been a little more careful myself. They wanted to set it on top of this little, one of these little stands you have beside your chairs to put your drink on or whatever. So we sat it on that. The problem was that the bottle it was in, poof, and then it goes poof, and then it goes poof, right? Well, about the third or fourth poof of 12, it falls off the stand. Now it's horizontal. It's spinning, and it's shooting at us. Well, I'm running toward it because I want to try to take care of it, but one of the girls actually got burned just a little bit, just a hair. But, it's actually shooting at us. You can get burned. It's gorgeous. But if you're not careful, you let it degenerate, and emotion can take you down a road you don't want to go down. We all know that. One of soul's challenges is to learn to handle emotion. You never completely control it, and you certainly don't want to wipe it out. That's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Emotion is rich. It's wonderful. It gives a richness to life. And yet, you have to put a governor on it to make sure it doesn't take over and run your life. You want to run your life with emotion, not emotion run your life with you, which is how it happens so often. And part of the way we do that is that we learn to, where am I? There I is. We learn to tame personality and govern emotion. Your soul is in here to tame this personality. This personality is like a wild horse, but once trained, it can ride it fairly well. But emotion, that we got to govern. Not let it go so wild that it's, like a governor on a motor. Says it's not going to let you overstimulate that. That motor isn't going to go up to some ridiculous RPMs. It's going to keep you down at a steady pace. You don't want to erase it. That's the higher realms. You want to experience it. It's got real power to it. But you want to keep it in the good area instead of the bad. How's that go? Luke 6:45. A good man brings out good things from the good treasure of his heart. And a bad man from the bad treasure of his heart brings out bad things. Your emotions can go up or down, good or bad. And what we want to do as a soul, your soul is coming in to try to inspire personality to shy away from the negative ones, to lighten up on them, and to embrace the beauty, the joy, the love, all the good stuff, and experience life richly that way. To generate good energies, we're here to learn how to generate all that good stuff, joy and love. We're here to learn how to release toxic emotions. Just let them go. Just let it flow out of you, rather than hang on to that resentment and anger or fear. And we're here to take responsibility for our emotional state, not say, that's just the way I feel. I can't help the way I feel. I can't help the way I feel. Now I'm going to quote Luke Skywalker in the most recent film. Every word in that sentence is wrong. You can help the way you feel. Absolutely. It's hard. It takes self-discipline. But you can do it. And if you actually exert a little dominion over yourself and begin to generate positive emotions and release the negative ones and stay there, you can create an amazingly fulfilling life. Number 4 is bonding with the living environment around you. Bonding with the living environment around you. Psalm 24:1, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. It's all God, right? It all belongs to God. We come in here and we think all the learning goes on between you and me and all us beings. There's a whole lot of other orders and types of life out there. And everything in the world has something to teach you. And learning to immerse yourself in it and experience another order of life that doesn't have my type of agenda really expand your horizons. I mean, whether it's plants, animals, you say, oh, well, they're not like us. They're not advanced like us. No, they're just a different expression of life with different goals, different definition of success. I mean, Jesus said we ought to be like the plants. I mean, we want to be like a mustard seed, right? With that type of tenacity that just plain doesn't give up and goes where it's going. Wow. Something to be learned from it. The valleys, the mountains, the seas, the wind, the land, they've all got something to teach us. Say, no, they're dead, we're alive. Oh, that's amazingly arrogant. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. It's all God, and don't tell me anything that's God is dead. But it will stretch your boundaries a little to try to embrace a tree that's been around for 300 years, when we do 100 at most, and stays rooted in one place while we travel all over the place. Or to try to experience a connection with animal life, or even the other direction, the harder stuff, to develop a relationship with the valley or the mountain that stood there for 10,000 or 100,000 years. That's a whole different experience of life than we do. And it stretches us out just to try to feel the strength of that type of continuity and touch just a little piece of that. Now, it stretches out time cycles, the experience, what it means to succeed. And in the end, one of the challenges of soul is to learn to love all of creation in a dog-eat-dog world. And it is. That's the human life. And that's where we go with number 5. Coping with change and a temporal existence. In soul form, you go on forever. In body form, from the moment you enter, you're leaving. Everything in your life is always going away. And that disturbs us at times. Disturbs us that there's so much we cannot depend on. We want it to be there for us. But the beauty of earth life is that it's this huge ice sculpture. And you best enjoy it now before it melts. Your life must be experienced and cherished right now, in the moment. And no, you won't have it forever, but that makes it even that much more valuable. That much more to be cherished. This is what temporal life is all about, learning to celebrate the temporary. And in the end, life is a kaleidoscope. I know we want to say, I've got it right where I want it to stay that way. And it would be so nice if that were true. But it's like the weather. Wait a little while and it'll change, right? Your life is always changing. It's this huge kaleidoscope, There's no way you can change it. Only appreciate each new experience that life offers. You say, then I have no anchor, but you do. In a world that's always changing, your anchor has to be God. That's the only thing that doesn't change. That's the only thing that is always with you. Number 6, the challenge of the appearance of separation. We all think we're separate beings, living in oneness while each part of life is forever flowing into another form of life. What do I mean by that? Everything down here is on somebody else's menu. Isn't this a weird? I mean, from higher realms looking at it, this has got to be one weird realm. Everything's eating everything else. Not just animal life. It's all going on. Yeah, okay. We're eating the animals are eating the plants, and the plants are eating the soil. They're bringing all kinds of minerals out of the soil. The sunlight is evaporating the ponds and the puddles, and it goes up and causes rain, which starts eating away at the valleys and the mountains. The wind tears at the soil, blows the cloud. Everything is constantly in motion. And so in the end, your body's going to disappear. And except for all the formaldehyde we like to use these days, it's going to become part of something else. The bottom line is, all of life is constantly flowing into other forms of life. So you are an individual. You have the appearance of having separation. You're supposed to defend your individual life. And yet you must also realize you are part of something greater. I am not just the individual, I am the whole. And that's a big one to explore through earth life. One of the ways we can finally accomplish the task is by learning through group work. Realizing where 2 or 3 or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. The realization that when you gather together, you are more than the individual parts. Group consciousness begins to expand us into that realization. I'm part of something more. Because group consciousness can do things that individual consciousness cannot. And that's one of the things we explore. And the last 2 I'm going to hit quickly. Your soul is multitasking. I know we think what we're doing here is really, really important and probably the main show, but it's not. It's just one of the shows. Your soul's working on many different levels, all at the same time. Lots of different dimensions. John 14:2, in my Father's house are many rooms. Your soul's exploring a lot of different rooms right now. Only humans think in terms of one at a time. Soul's doing it all at the same time. When people say, why are we here? And that's Reg saying, yeah, but why are we doing these stupid things we do? Why are we going through these challenges? Why are we doing all this stuff that hurts? Why do bad things happen? And the only answer I can give is our role in life is to help explore every possibility. God is exploring every possibility of life there is, and you're part of that. You're one of the agents on the front lines exploring what happens if this happens, what happens if that happens, what happens if this happens. I can bring it all back as experienced. And there's a whole lot more going on than you realize. Inside of you is a spiritual being that's capable of functioning on several different possibility dimensions. in a whole lot of different rooms in the Father's house at the same time. The last one's soul work. That is, I've already described, soul work appears to be guiding your personality. That is what it's here to do. That is definitely one of its purposes. We are here to guide this personality through, to try to inspire it to get beyond these issues that we're dealing with, to try to inspire it to become more positive, to create a better life, to do this, to do that. Your soul in the back of you is constantly urging you towards a better and higher life. But I said a few weeks ago, your personality came here for you. But I guarantee you, your soul came here for humanity. And so at the same time that higher self within you is inspiring you to be more, it is working with other souls to create within this plane a magnetic field, whatever you want to call it, that is drawing humanity forward into what it can become. Revelation 21:1, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Your soul is working on in the higher realms, in the thought atmosphere, to help draw humanity, the whole, not just your individual self, but humanity, toward a new heaven and a new earth, towards a higher expression in this plane. Well, that's just 8 of them. There's all kinds of stuff. It's just interesting. We spend so much time looking from this outer self at what we can do and saying, okay, I got a soul in me, but this is all about me. It isn't all about you. It's all about your soul, whether you realize it or not. And once in a while, it's nice to take a look and see, what is the soul doing here? Why did it come here? I mean, well, I said I wouldn't give you practices, but I will. I'm going to end with 4 rules for getting the most out of your earth experience. They're real quick. Always strive for super awareness. After all, the world always has something to teach you. Become as aware of everything you're going through as possible, because there's always gems there to experience. Number 2, learn with your heart and not just with your head. Often, that which the world has to teach you, you feel it with your heart long before you can put it into words. Sometimes you had a dream, you learned something from it. You can't figure out what it is, but it's got this feeling to it. And when you have felt the lesson before you can intellectually analyze the lesson, continue to feel it. Immerse yourself in the feeling and absorb it through that door. In the end, it's amazingly effective. And number 3, get to know God through creation. You want to know God? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Start looking around. God is shining out at you through everything. And number 4, remember you are a spiritual being given the privilege of this vacation here in the earth. Now, it doesn't feel like a vacation to us. But you need to know, while you are slaving away, working your tail off, trying to create a good life, while you are dealing with all kinds of amazing emotions that cause you pain, while you are handling the burdens of life, your soul's having the time of its life. That's what it came here for. And if we could tap just a little bit into that, it would make it a little bit easier on us. So if we can remember that, the outer world doesn't feel quite so harsh. Let's close our eyes. Father, give us the strength to get beyond ourselves, to awaken to that soul within, and to work with it to experience this life to the fullest. Thy will be done through each and every one of us. Amen. The ushers who come forward will prepare for our offering.